if you are here as an attendee, if you can just like introduce yourself in the chat and let us know where you're calling in from, just so we know, who's here listening to this panel and start to build a little bit of community in the chat. Yeah, so my name is Maggie King. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the program coordinator for the content creation program, which is a new occupational endorsement that offers 100% online courses through the Interior Alaska campus. And this program offers classes, advising, and opportunities for students to turn their online presence into an effective business. And we have a strong focus on digital entrepreneurship opportunities in rural Alaska. And I'm just gonna drop the link to our program in the chat if people are interested in learning more. And then we also are working with Maya and the UAF Theater and Film Department. And I'm actually gonna show a quick video to introduce the Theater and Film Department. 1 second. Okay.
All right, let's do it, let's do it.
Here we go, pictures of flush and shadows. Ready, roll camera.
All right, thanks everyone for watching that. Yeah, and before we go any further, I wanted to acknowledge that the content creation program and the Theater and Film Department are based out of the Tarathiyata campus, which is located on the unceded traditional lands of the Lower Tanana Dene people who have lived on and cared for this land since time immemorial. We would like to express our gratitude for their continued stewardship of this land on which we are humble guests. And I'd also like to extend that gratitude to the Indigenous people on whose land our panelists and guests on this Zoom call reside, as their continued stewardship of the natural world benefits us all. And just a couple Zoom housekeeping points. I recommend keeping the chat open as we're going to be dropping some links in there and hopefully having some nice conversation. But for questions, please submit your questions via the Q&A button, which will be in the center bottom of your screen. You can submit questions at any time throughout the event, and we'll save hopefully about 10 minutes at the end of the panel for audience questions. This event is being recorded. You will not appear on the recording unless you unmute yourself or asked to unmute yourself. So the recording is only of the panelists, and we'll be sharing a recording of the event to everyone who is registered via a follow-up email. So without anything else to say, I'm going to turn it over to Maya, who is an associate professor of film and video arts in the Department of Theater and Film at UAF. Maya was the founding director of the UAF film program and has been teaching film production history and theory at UAF since 2007. And Maya, if you want to take things from here.
Thank you so much, Maggie. I am really honored to be part of this conversation today and to bring together this group of experts who can help guide us through the conversation about this intersection between film and social media and the way the two have become very integrated over time. We are going to, and I want to really thank Maggie King. So thank you so much to Maggie for putting all of this together and gracefully navigating through all of the interfaces of media to help get all of our wonderful attendees here today. So thank you very much. As Maggie said, I'm with Theater and Film, and I am very honored to continue to teach here at the Trotieda campus at UAF. We do offer a 4-year degree program in film and performing arts where students can study and concentrate in either theater or film production with minors in both. And that is the only film program and film and performing arts program right now in the state of Alaska. So we have the honor to continue this conversation and education as part of our mission in the media arts. As we get started here, I'd like to introduce you to this wonderful group of panelists. Thank you all so much for being here. I'd like to start by introducing you to Travis Gilbert. Travis runs the YouTube channel Curious Tangents, which is a video series asking and answering random questions about the world and human behavior. In addition to being a content creator, Travis is also a student at Arizona State University. Travis, would you like to say a few words while we introduce your video, before we introduce your video?
Sure. So I think you said it pretty well, but the video you're about to see is a video that I did on a misconception that a lot of people have with the idea of stress and how stress can sometimes be good for you. To be strong. Stress on the body, even stress that pushes the body to the limit, albeit without breaking anything, makes us stronger. This kind of physical stress that can be good for the body is not what most people mean when they say that they're stressed out. Most of us know that these kinds of physical stress are good for us. What we mean is that we are emotionally or cognitively overwhelmed. Like when I say that I have to finish 168 different projects this year, it's me being cognitively overwhelmed. I think that most people think that the mind and body run on two completely separate systems and are thus strengthened in two different ways. At least that's what I thought a while ago. However, that doesn't seem to be the truth. It seems that you can strengthen your cognitive capacity or emotional resilience the same way that you can strengthen your bones and muscles. But back to stress. We would categorize my bone and muscle example as being the same thing. That's probably good. However, say my boss, who no longer exists.
One of the great challenges in this world is knowing enough about a subject to think you're right.
We got it.
Always
Thank you
getting
so
the
much,
YouTube
Travis.
ads, which I'm sure we'll talk about in this panel.
We may end up doing that. So to see more of Travis's work, you can see his YouTube channel and follow the work that he's doing. Thank you so much. And the next panelist I'd like to introduce is Alex Salih. So Alex Anurag Salih grew up in Anchorage and is of Inupiaq descent. Her love of filmmaking and sound found its start in radio. In 2019, she wrote and directed her debut short film, Who We Are, which was a personal project dedicated to her Inupiaq ancestors. Who We Are was chosen as a grand prize winner in the She Directed Filmmaker contest out of 406 submissions nationwide. Alex continues her work on cultural visual projects and honors Indigenous stories and people. And Chief Alex, thank you for being here. Would you like to introduce more before we see your clip?
Sure. I'm Alex Salih. Well, Alexis, I go by Alex, but one of my teachers told me in credits to put Alexis so people know that I'm a woman. So I always remember that just as a representation kind of thing. I'm a Inupiaq on my father's side from Shishmaref in Nome, Alaska, and Mexican on my mother's side from Tepic, Nayarit, Mexico. And as you said, I'm a director and producer born and raised here in Anchorage on the lands of the Dena'ina, and really have come through a full journey here, leaving Alaska and coming back. And it's great to be here. Koyinakpak for having me. And I'm not sure which clip we're playing, so we'll see. just to give some context, that was our teaser for who we are. And speaking on social media, we really wanted to do a promo that hit that kind of 60-second before you could do the longer videos, and just really want to do something with sound design and visuals, and having the Inupiaq drum be the driver in that.
It certainly gives me the chills and makes me want to see the film again. It's such a beautiful trailer and a great introduction to your work. Thank you so much. Next, I'd love to introduce everyone to Mike Green. Mike is actually, you're an alumni from UAF, are you not, Mike?
I never took classes or graduated, but I did some projects there. I'm here primarily as the business end of these things, but I did, as Maya knows, because I worked with Maya many, many years ago, and then again, not so many years ago on projects. So I do have that background, but the clip will give the background for tonight.
Great. Well, I want to share a little bit more about you, Mike. He's been the financial and legal coordinator for YouTube channels VidCon, Subbable, which is now Patreon, and DFTBA.com, a merchandise company for online creators. Mike has more than 10 years of experience with the business side of digital content creation. And it's a pleasure to work with you again here today, Mike. Thank you. We'll share the clip from you.
Hi, I'm Mike Green. For 10 years, I led the legal and financial parts of content creation for Complexly Media, including SciShow, Crash Course, and 36 other YouTube channels. I was also the financial and legal part of VidCon, where thousands of creators come together to learn and share experiences. So while I'm not a content creator, I have worked with and advised creators and platforms that they use. My son Hank continues to create many types of content. Here's his perspective as a creator.
Good morning, John. We are really lucky. Here's the thing that's kind of hard for me to think about. Over the last 10 years, we have had 1,400 chances to try something new. And in one way or another, sometimes big, sometimes super tiny, we have tried something new every single video. And the success of those attempts has been judged by the number of views those things got, what kind of audiences they attracted, whether we liked doing them, how our friends and families felt, whether we thought those videos were interesting and good, and also by people telling us what they thought in the comments. In those 1,400 chances, a lot of those ideas were duds, but some of them were amazing. I made a video with a person I met at a weird tiny research museum in Missoula, which led to the Brain Scoop becoming a thing. And you and I made videos on the French Revolution and on the circulatory system that led to Crash Course. We've had thousands of chances to evolve our content and thousands of chances to evolve ourselves. And this has helped me clear up the murky waters of what it is that I really care about. For me, the most important time that happened was when you distilled so much of what the world needs right now into 3 words, when you said, imagine others complexly. So this week, after years of thinking about this and never being able to settle on a name, we are changing our name of the company that produces the content. We have called it Complexly, because the world is not simple, and we will never truly understand our universe or each other or even ourselves. The process is as powerful as the outcome, and the more you know, the more wonderful knowing becomes. Because we want to imagine things complexly, and because we want to help other people do it too. John, I'll see you on Tuesday.
Thank you, Mike. So that was a great insight into all of the work that your family's been doing as major content creators on YouTube for many years. And last but certainly not least, I'd like to introduce everyone to Emma Schaefer. Emma is a filmmaker and artist from Washington State. She has a bachelor's degree in film and television production and fine arts from the University of Southern California, and is currently living and working under Nainaina Alaina and head of production at Channel Films. Welcome. Hi, Emma.
Hi. Yes, I work here in Alaska. I've lived here for about 7 years, or going on 8 years, at Channel Films, which is a video production company here in Anchorage.
Emma, we're
which
losing
I'm
your audio.
head of production, and shoot, we watched the video, and I'll try and find an Ethernet cable really quick. Okay, I'll BRB.
I'll just give a quick intro that the video I'm about to show is from Channel Films, where Emma works, and is a representation of some of the work that she has done.
Hopefully you can hear me better now. Yes. Yay for Ethernet. Well, yeah, that was a demo reel for Channel Films. Save for a few shots, I either directed or shot or had a hand in producing those projects. There was a few at the end before my time, but for the most part. And yeah, that's all I have to say.
Well, it's so lovely to see all of your work in a series, because I think that hopefully our audience now is really excited to hear more about your insight to the work that you've created and the way that this, your cinematic work or your work in content creation, it has evolved over time, and the way that you think about your work. So I wanted to start with a little bit of a framework, and Maggie, if you would mind sharing that image, that would just be helpful for a visual. So in filmmaking and most creative work, we all create our content using a formula of process, right? So I've broken this just into really broad levels of talking about our intention and the pre-production that kind of gets the body of work started, whatever that medium is. The process of creation itself, the way that we produce it and the choices we make while we're creating the content. And then the audience, who's our audience? Where is it destined? How is it going to be distributed? And then in the middle of that is the thing that we make, right? Whatever that content is, what that media is. And I do believe that these three things are, they're not a linear progression, and that we have to think about them collectively all the time. So my first question is, how does the way you think about your output and the audience change the way you create? So one of the biggest differences being the way that distribution of traditional film has been in film festivals versus online media being sort of free and accessible for all. How has that discovery of content creation, thinking of your audience, changed how you create? And I'm just going to open it up right now and maybe start with you, Alex, and see if you have any insight into how that started for you.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. But I think about like how there are as far as like posting your own content creation onto social medias, like I think of Instagram, for instance. Someone once told me like Instagram is kind of the new business card, and it's been one of the areas that people have approached me to collaborate on work, just because they've seen something that is related to something they want to do, or you know there's always like some sort of interest in just being able to see someone's work and then having that discussion with community and comments or in private message. um so I think really just being able to kind of put yourself out there without having to go through all the channels of like maybe the larger film world of raising money, even for a short film, raising a certain amount of money to shoot something, where you can there's more affordable things in the gear now in some of the cinematic DSLR lines where you can shoot a lot of your own content and put some really beautiful stuff out there. So um I think I don't want to go too long, let everyone else answer.
Great. Emma, you've got a post that you do, thinking of Instagram, doing Insta Repeat. Would you mind talking a little bit about that and maybe how your content has shifted using that medium or other mediums on social networks?
Yeah, I think that the platform itself can often drive a genre. The audience within a platform and like sub audiences can drive what you create. And there's a big opportunity to utilize the conventions of a platform, the audience built into the platform, even just the way something is displayed to really reinforce the project, whether that be video, photography, conceptual art. So with Insta Repeat, it's a project really about the idea of simulacra and copies without an original, and kind of this questioning what originality is. And for that project, Insta Repeat, which is really an appropriation or curation project, pulling images from Instagram and then redisplaying them on Instagram, really utilizes, well, I hope utilizes the platform, Instagram itself, to further strengthen the basic fundamental themes. And, it's not a set project, it evolves, and I grow as a creator as my audience grows or platform changes. And hopefully that symbiosis with the platform makes the conversation that's ongoing more interesting and stronger. But I think that could be said, I think Insta Repeat is an interesting example of that, because it's pretty obvious. It's commentary on social media in a lot of ways. But I mean, that really can come down to even small decisions when making work and deciding where to display that, like what your platforms are and what they mean to your medium or genre on a fundamental level.
Mike, as you've been somebody who has managed these platforms for a long time, and talking about how that algorithm, I think that the comment of the platform can drive the genre or the content and really will end up directing, especially now as Insta Repeat or TikTok, these algorithms are driving what people are creating. What's been your observation in watching this sort of evolve and the role that it's had on Complexly?
Well, there's two things. One is the lack of the disappearance of the gatekeeper, except of course Google and YouTube, but the traditional gatekeepers, so that you can put content out there and it has global distribution instantaneously. I mean, you couldn't have dreamed about something like that. So that's the strength of it. The other flip side of it is that the platforms evolve and they change. So if you're think if your sole goal is to like be the most views, you're going to have to kind of change what you do as they change. And that's probably not what most people in this seminar are looking for. As you know, you've got something that you want to share, you're trying to figure out the best way to share it. You know, what your idea is, what your audience is, and where they are, and how those other platforms, you know, all the platforms can kind of contribute to you distributing it, in effect, getting it seen. And it's a great, you know, there's this network of platforms now that you can utilize, and that's great. But to pick a platform and say, boy, this platform's fabulous, like TikTok is the best thing. It is if you want to live inside TikTok, or, you know, YouTube's the best thing if you want to live inside YouTube, but Instagram is better for other things. It just is. And Facebook reaches a lot of people that these other things don't reach. Sometimes. I hate Facebook, but that's okay. That's an editorial comment. So that's what I would say. Use the platforms. Don't let the platforms use you.
Can I say one thing? I just think it's interesting how you said, or just spoke about gatekeepers and how that seems to have dissipated. I actually feel like I see the opposite. And granted, I am from a very privileged point of view. I'm college educated white woman in America, but I think I'm given a lot of platform to speak. But I do see just the way the algorithms are designed, and those aren't like, you know, unsentient things. Those are created by people and also fed and adapted by viewers, actually create like an even stronger gatekeeping system that can be really hard to break out of. I mean, just one example is shadow banning, but just in terms of what gets seen, we don't have, as creators, don't actually have as much control or transparency as it might appear. And especially if you're not from a point of creating something within the guidelines of what is acceptable or popular or trendy, then you can fall outside of those gates. And I think that is something that I'm looking at with InstaRepeat, is like, there is within a genre of photography, or even all photography outdoors, there is a gate to viewership based off of an aesthetic, and that's driven by an algorithm that is driven by mainstream popular culture, likes, monetization of content ads, and that is like a very, very strong gate to break out of. And I think the only reason I broke through that on that one platform and haven't on others is because I actually kind of played in those rules. So I don't know, stronger or less strong. Yes, there's more places to show your work, but is the most important thing that's being said being what's heard and disseminated? Because I would argue no.
Well, that's a really critical point, especially in this day and age where we know that misinformation can get widely spread and find an audience, and has directed people in terms of their content creation. So thinking about the audience you want to attract, Travis, who were you looking for when you decided to start your YouTube channel, and who was your intended audience? And do you think you found them, or have they found you?
So for me, when I was a kid, I was like always very disengaged in school, but I was always really, really engaged with like educational YouTube videos and things like that. So the audience that I really wanted to target were kids that had a hard time like learning information in like a traditional setting, but that probably spent a lot of time on YouTube and like would more easily pick something up in a YouTube video than they would in a classroom setting, maybe, or would be like supplemental to that. Do I think I found it? Not really, because if you look at my analytics, most of the people who watch my videos are like 25 to 34, and then like up, and then like the demographics that are the demographics that like I'm talking about are one of the smaller categories. So I kind of missed the mark on that one, I suppose. But
well, and one of the things that a number of you guys have in common is working with this educational platform in particular, and using a lot of your work with an audience reach intended for younger people. How has the educational aspect of it influenced the work that you're doing, and do you feel a sense of responsibility as you continue to make these videos to get the information right? What's your process ultimately in developing your content to be educational?
Well, the first thing that I was doing was I would watch stuff from other science communicators, like the Bill Nyes and like the Vlogbrothers and like Vsauce, and just like watch the videos where they would explain their process. And it comes down to like being a lot of really in-depth stuff. Like there's particular ways that people will word their sentences so that they're more easily understood, and just things like not using big words unnecessarily. And if you are going to use a big word, always use it after you've explained what it is, and different things like that. And I do feel like a lot of responsibility to make sure that I'm putting out things that are as accurate as they can be. Like the longest portion of my production process is always the research phase, like by like a significant margin. And yeah.
That's really interesting. So that when you look at your overall view, that research is your primary motivator of doing that work. And I think that many of us can attribute to that pre-production process as being, sort of that impetus. Alex, do you feel like you have a specific audience in mind with your work overall, or have you been seeking different audiences because your work is less commercial? So how do you define your work as an artist and continue to develop that audience through social media?
Yeah, so it's interesting. My going from audio post-production, working in kind of the Hollywood and theatrical film, I've got to really see like the back end of how big directors and actors and producers work. And I think at some point I gained enough confidence where, if you work on enough films, my mindset sort of changed, and I was like I don't connect with these stories. If I ever want to see Alaska Native people on screen, I felt like, especially Alaska Native women or queer people, like I would kind of have to step up a little bit. And not really coming from a filmmaking background, I was kind of in the audience first before I ever thought about like what's an artist, who's the filmmaker, any of that kind of stuff, or what I wanted as a director. I just wanted to see my people like honored and respected in a way that they really haven't been. There's so many beautiful stories in our communities, and I felt that I just had my own perspective of it. That's kind of what you come in as a creative, is having a perspective that's uniquely yours and the way that you want to tell a story. So I just started writing things that were inspirational to me, and collaborating with Indigenous artists that would want to be in front of the camera, and then slowly through trial and error, like learning how to cut things, what makes, what kind of angles tell my story better, or what kind of lighting helps really make this cinematic, what kind of gear. So I've really just like developed it in that way, where I was maybe just looking at Native audiences, Indigenous audiences. But I think now, after kind of getting all the feedback I have with releasing my first short film, it's been something the Western community or white community is really connected to with as well. And I think the more that we can put ourselves in front of more eyes, the more we move the needle of like, who are we actually, and like how we want to represent ourselves versus how people have represented us.
thank you for doing that, because it is such a huge lift in some ways to be one where you feel like it's potentially your responsibility to do this work, and it's valuable work to be doing. Emma, you and I have both worked on Molly of Denali, and there's its own weight on that as well. Do you want to talk a little bit about your approach to working on such a national show and representing Indigenous people? And with a lot of this, that your work is also online. And so you are working with that kid demographic. You know, what's going through your mind as you create these pieces, and what's your approach to this work?
Yeah, well, it's evolved a lot. I've been working on interstitials for Molly of Denali, which are like 90-second live action clips that go between 2 episodes. Since the show started, so like 2018 or 2019. But yeah, it's evolved a lot, both because I've learned, and we as a production company have learned, not just how to make short films about kids, but for kids. And there was absolutely a learning curve. Even though we felt like we knew beforehand, we didn't in retrospect, and so our approach has greatly changed. But also I mean, yeah, I'm always trying to examine myself and make sure that I'm doing the best that I can in my specific role. You mentioned representation, trying to examine my role in creating videos and making sure I'm not representing me, Emma is not representing or trying to represent Indigenous culture, but just be a conduit. That was my like, I'm not a part of it, but I'm like lending my expertise. I don't know why I'm doing that hand motion. So, and being able to do that is not a perfect science. You can't just say, oh no, I'm not a part of it. It's not my story. I'm just gonna help tell it. Like, no matter what, especially with kids and learning goals and informational text that you have to incorporate, like my hands or whoever else on our team is working on it are going to be in it. So how can we still make that as authentic as possible? And that's where that evolution comes in, and learning of like, in certain instances, like showing the participants of the video before we even show PBS or GBH. I think they'd be okay with me saying that, just to make sure that like, okay, we cut up your clip that you talked for this long and we're only showing it for 10 seconds. Did we interpret what you were saying correctly? Or one thing that we've been doing recently, because of the pandemic, but has really taught me so much more and like been very helpful for that, is sending camera kits out to kids so that they can film themselves, and so parents can film their kids, and we can prompt like much deeper discussions, because it's less of it's an imposition in a different way, but it's less of an imposition of that pressure of somebody like me wanting to elicit a certain response from a child who wants to say the right thing, or even me having a preconceived notion of what the answer should be when I don't know. And I can tell myself I don't know, and I'm open to anything, but we can't control what our expectations are or what our facial expressions say. And so when we're literally taken out of it and the camera's out of our own hands, and families get to direct themselves with guidance, it poses other challenges, but in that sense is really, really liberating to the story. And yeah, has like, again, in terms of reflecting on our process, my process, and trying to like get better, be better every, as I go along. That whole process has taught me a lot. That process that we're still in, even as we transition back into filming in person, that kind of self-guided, self-directed mentality. I already talked a lot, but there's an approach we try to keep in mind at work that we talk a lot about here at Channel Films, which is you have a plan, you have an expectation, you do research so that you're prepared and you're not imposing it, your own anything, and you make a shooting plan, but then when you actually get on set and you're working with your collaborators, your participants, your subjects, interviewees, you have to almost put the plan aside. Like, you've done everything you can in that stage, and now you have to let the experience that you're in guide what you make, and you can't force it into your preconceived notion unless it's your story to tell. But as an often commercial or documentary filmmaker, it's often not my story to tell, or maybe partially my story, but especially if we're for a client, it has nothing to do with me. And so as much as we plan and prepare, we then have to let the story guide itself. And then that process starts again once we finish filming. You know, we've gotten every puzzle piece we can get, but we can't shoot. I mean, we can't edit for what we thought we were going to shoot or how we thought it was going to fit together. We now have to then look at those puzzle pieces objectively and edit with the material that we have, and now let that footage guide us how it will fit together. And so keeping that in mind helps us not pigeonhole a story into what we think it should be as filmmakers. And that helps.
Well, and I think this is this is an interesting time where we have almost all become our own filmmakers, right? We've got our little Zoom cameras set up, and we're all sort of setting our own stage, and putting the control back in each individual's hand, I think, is really valuable when it comes to these issues of representation, misrepresentation, and, you know, whose voice and how is the authority being told. So it's what an interesting opportunity to be able to create this new bridge with that show. So turning now, as we're talking about production and the work that sort of kind of gets imposed upon us as maybe commercial, you know, filmmakers, part of the work is making a living, right? And it all eventually comes down to the economics of maintaining this career and finding the opportunities. So I'm interested in, you know, any advice, especially Mike, with the creation of Patreon and your involvement in Patreon. How did that come about, and how have you seen the opportunities for filmmakers in social media to really generate a livelihood in a way that wasn't there previously?
Yeah, advertising revenue for online media is still horrible. It was more horrible, you know, 5 or 10 years ago. So something had to happen. And we were forced, because we'd gotten major funding from Google to do 2 shows, Crash Course and SciShow, for 2 years. And their budgets were like $500,000 a piece a year. And we knew that money was going away. It was not going to be year 3. So where do you go from that? So that's what facilitated the creation of Subbable. And Patreon and Subbable actually started around the same time. But it was clear to us early on, for a whole bunch of legal reasons and bank regulations, and, you know, Patreon is funded by venture capitalists, and they don't care about regulations. They're going to destroy the, you know, they're going to go fast and break things, and we weren't going to do that. But at any rate, so we wanted to be able to have people send money monthly, and Patreon started off as like per deal, per project, per song, per movie. So, but we knew the folks, we knew Jack Hundy really well, and we were very supportive, blah, 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 blah. So we built this thing up. It was working for us and for 20 creators, you know. So eventually, so we basically just sold it to Patreon, you know, sold it to Patreon. They made a grant of $100,000. It was like $100,000. There was hardly any purchase price involved at all, but the $100,000 went to the creators at Subbable to sort of incentivize them to get on Patreon. And that was years ago. Patreon has now gone like that. And it is a place that you want to go fairly soon if you want to have a relationship with your viewers, your consumers, your community. If you want to have a relationship with them, Patreon is definitely something to research. They've got videos about how to do it, starting small, kind of best practices. You can do it pretty early on. So that's my answer to support. If your viewers want to support you, let them support you. And most creators are like, I need to do something for them. I need to give them merchandise, or I need to give them points or stickers or stars or something. Most people just want to support you, you know? So let them.
Well, it's an interesting, you know, ever since we had Kickstarter and, you know, indie production, sort of social networking for crowdfunding and crowdsourcing, Patreon has sort of taken it to the next level of just dedicating to a person your ongoing commitment for them. And I applaud you for thinking of such an incredible opportunity for so many, because it really has enabled folks to take risks that maybe weren't there before. And I think that's one of the things that social media can really allow people to do in a positive way. So we're kind of coming already around the corner. We're running in towards this very tight edge of our conversation. But I wanted to sort of talk a little bit more about, you know, where do you want to go next, and what are the opportunities that you see out there for your own work, and where the social networks are right now? What are you watching, or what are you paying attention to that might be of interest to others? And I'll just leave this open. Anyone wants to jump in? Go ahead, Travis. I see you thinking it.
So one of the things that I think about a lot is how on YouTube, are you guys familiar with a guy named Mark Roper? On YouTube, there's like a few creators who like make things that are like educational and like intellectually involved that'll like hit the top of the like trending list, and that like lots of people see and lots of people talk about. And then like the vast majority of other things that are of that same niche tend to be like, well niche, and like it wouldn't be a thing that's like widely talked about. So one of the things that I'd really like to do is to make something that is like intellectual in nature, but still like widely conceived. Like I think like that would do like a lot of good, like on the platform in general.
Well, one of the things I've been watching, which I'm really curious about with the filmmaking now, is so many of the film festivals went virtual this last year, and so many more people attended them. And it seemed like there was an opportunity of like this intersection happened again, where, you know, a lot of content that was made for film distribution, there's been a limit to what people could put on YouTube. You couldn't get it in a film festival if it had already been pre-released, right? So the line had sort of been drawn in the sand by the gatekeepers of different festivals and so on, awards. And I'm wondering if that line will start to merge a little bit. So that's one thing I'm watching to see if with so many festivals moving to online formats, if there will be more of an embracing towards that. Well, we have about 10 minutes left, and so I'd love to be able to open it up to the community. We do have a question right now for Emma. And if Tiffany, if you are online and you'd like to ask the question, you're welcome to unmute yourself. Otherwise, I can ask it for you. Oh, she doesn't have a microphone. I apologize. Okay, so Emma, what's your curation process look like with InstaRepeat? Do you run into any issues of ownership? Thank you, she says.
I have a set of rules for or guidelines for myself with who I feature based off of like the specific genre that I'm focusing on, just as an example, because this could be, a focused lens. I chose a focused lens, but I don't really run into any issues with ownership, though I think it would be amazing if someone tried to sue me for copyright infringement on this project, like that's the goal. So I'm just putting that out in the universe.
Thank you for that. Well, we're just going to keep monitoring the questions, and please, guests, if you have anything that you want to talk to the panelists about, don't be shy. One of the things that we were talking about when we sort of met ahead of time is these takeaways, you know, and advice for students. Complexly and the Arizona State University have an agreement with Crash Course. And so I'm curious about that relationship. And then Travis, what's your experience being involved with that? And have you been involved in that relationship and between the two organizations?
Yeah, so ASU started a video production deal with Complexly, and part of what they do, so when you're at ASU, they if you're online like I am, they have a thing where the instructors basically talk to you via YouTube video, and there's a regular version to that, and then there is a Crash Course version to that. And without throwing shade, the Crash Course version is like far superior. It's a very much like a high production, like engaging style of teaching what is mostly the exact same course information, but done in just a way that like makes you want to pay more attention to it. If that is answering your question.
Yeah, it's an interesting partnership. Mike, do you have anything to add about that relationship and the partnership?
My audio went bad on me. My connection went bad, so I didn't hear the whole question. But it's an important partnership for Complexly. Arizona State wants to make, I mean, they're doing the right things in terms of access. So we're trying to do that, and you know, it all exists within accreditation. Universities are accredited. So for instance, you know, Algebra 1 or not, math, let's say, the freshman math class is a lot the same everywhere, but it's bad. It's just terrible. It's just a roadblock. It's a wall. It's, my son Hank, who's got a biochemistry degree, signed up for the class to, let's not record this. Anyway, he signed up for the class to see what it was like, because he's an educational media creator. And he was like, I'm staring at this stuff for an hour at a time if I can't do it. I mean, what kind of wall is this to put in front of people to get a college degree? So it's, it's not just doing videos. There's a lot of moving pieces, but Arizona State is truly, truly committed to trying to, break down those barriers, which I think is great. Yeah.
We have a question here from Julian Dan. Julian, do you want to ask your question?
Sure. I was just wondering, for those of you that started in another field, how you started kind of like bridging that gap and managing your time between a creative outlet and kind of making that into a career or a more established trajectory.
I guess I can go on that one. That's a good question, because that's the hard transition. If you're able to, work a job, an intern, that kind of thing, that's a great way to just kind of get your experience and start to get credits. Credits and reel is in building your reel is really like, that's kind of your card to be able to pick up clients and show them the work that you can do. But even now I work full-time for LinkedIn as an audio engineer. So I'm an audio engineer full-time. And my vacation time, weekends after 5 p.m. is devoted to the work I want to do. And luckily they treat us really well. So I'm able to kind of just like give notice and be like, I'm going to go film something. But it's still related in a way, but not in the work that I want to do. But it's a tough balance, and at some point you can really burn out. So I would definitely, find those moments for yourself to rest and recover. But if you want to do it, you just have to find those ways to do it. That's really all I can say.
For me, when I started YouTube, I worked at the bank, and I would do YouTube in like all of my spare time, basically, because I was like really interested in it. And like a little bit after I got like fully monetized on YouTube and stuff, I lost my job at the bank. And so I started spending more time on YouTube, and eventually like my Patreonage and stuff picked up, and to the point where I make like roughly the same amount of money that I did when I was working at like my traditional job. So yeah, I would say like in terms of like making money, like there's usually like multiple avenues in whatever you're doing. Like one of the like Patreon is like a gigantic one. But like in a week I'm doing my first brand deal in different things like that. Like there's other ways to like monetize content other than just like the straightforward ads that always get talked about on YouTube.
So we had another question from Whitney. She's asked if you could go back to the beginning of your creative journey with film and media, what would you have changed, done more of, or done less of?
I can jump in. When I started, I worked for free a lot. I don't know if that's the best advice, but volunteering for older student projects, or interning at a place that maybe didn't have an internship but convinced them to let me hang around, or creating a position, like making learning opportunities for yourself, or that's what I did a lot of, and it definitely was grueling and still is. I wouldn't say I stopped doing that. I think I don't know if I would have changed anything. I think that especially when I moved to Alaska and took this job working at a film production company, I'm also an artist and do conceptual art. My art practice is very separate from the work I do at work, and my own personal video work is somewhere in between. And I thought, I'll feel successful and I'll feel like I'm doing the right thing when those all merge into one. And it really like caused me a lot of anxiety. And I was always like, well, should I even be doing like art and even pursuing doing shows if I'm like making commercials and like on my phone? It felt like I had to be doing one thing. And now that I have lived longer, I realize like that it's okay to do multiple things, especially if they do inform each other or you're learning in each avenue, whether that's your day job or doing something that you have to do for money. Like as long as you're learning from something, like you can take the pressure off to be like, I am a documentary filmmaker. People ask like, what are you, or what do you do? And like that question is very stressful. I mean, it still is stressful. I haven't really resolved all these feelings in myself. I still have these like insecurities. But aspirationally, I tell myself like, no, it's okay to be a lot of different things. It's okay to do a project on this platform that's this one thing, and it's okay to make commercials, and it's okay to volunteer, do political work that for something you care about, and do TikTok. Like it's okay. This is my therapy session for everyone. It's okay to do whatever you want to do. Just gonna peter off.
finding the time to do as many things as you're interested in is always a challenge too, right? And we have a couple other questions that are coming in, but I want to be cognizant of the time. It is already 5 o'clock. So I want to thank everybody for making the time. If we didn't get to your questions, they're in the chat, and perhaps we can address them online. Panelists, are you willing to take another question, one last one? Yeah. I'd like to, I think this will be a good way to end. Andrew, who's a former student of ours. Hi, Andrew. What's the best way to connect with other filmmakers to work on projects together?
If you're in Alaska, I will plug something I'm not a part of, but Alaska Filmmakers Society for Alaska Filmmakers is a website, and I have noticed that it's mostly men and white men. And so, not saying that if you're a white man you shouldn't join, you should totally join, but also anybody else, you should totally join that, because I don't know of another good place in Alaska, and I think that it would be great if there was a place we could all see each other, and that platform already exists. So that's cool. That's a suggestion.
For me, the best way has been through film festivals. That's kind of where I've seen really active filmmakers, you know, that are doing work, putting their stuff out there. So usually there's like a Facebook group or something, but you know, the virtual thing, like there's a lot of different Facebook groups for different film festivals, but I feel like, you know, actually attending the festivals and meeting people is like, that energy is, you know, definitely missed. And then also, like, if you work in a certain kind of niche of work, like for me, like Alaska or Indigenous, like filmmaking, there's certain groups. If you're a brown female and into documentary, there's a group called the Brown Girls Doc Mafia that's really cool, has a lot of great resources for grants. Try to get in a fellowship. Like that's been one of my biggest kind of circles where I've been able to talk with other people kind of in the same level of in their career, and just kind of discuss and have just like people to like throw your ideas out to. There's a ton of different filmmaking fellowships. For women, there's the WIF, Women in Film. If you're a documentary filmmaker, IDA, the International Documentary Association, is a great place to find grants and production, funding, or just like learning how to write like a beat sheet, all kinds of stuff. So definitely there's a lot of resources out there. Hopefully Maya and Maggie will be able to link some of those.
Great. Well, I love this conversation. I hope that everyone who's participated has gained some joy from these ideas. And I really want to thank Alex, Travis, Mike, Emma, and Maggie for pulling us all together and just sharing time together to explore these concepts and how they might apply. Keep in touch with everybody, keep creating, keep sharing, and we'll look forward to the next iteration of our conversations together.
Thank you. See you guys.
Should I leave? Should we leave? Oh,
sorry.
You're
welcome to stay on. We have more people with questions. There's a question for you, Travis, specifically.
Yeah,
I don't know if Sarah's still online. She's still online. Sarah is still here, but I wanted to give people a send-off if they wanted it. But did you see her question, Travis?
Yeah, I can answer that. So how do you make the jump from Patreon and YouTube to be able to support yourself full-time off those platforms? You should definitely not do it the way that I did it, because I didn't so much make a jump as I got like pushed off a cliff and just had to like make stuff work. It's like YouTube can be like a really slow, like gradual process. Eventually, like something, like a lot of people tend to think that like their current growth rate is going to be their like constant growth rate, and that's not the case. Things tend to pick up exponentially as they go on. And so I would say that, like, although it's like very uncomfortable, it is kind of like a consistent grind until you start to get noticed in like an algorithm way. Something really good that like helps to accelerate growth is emailing other creators who do something similar to what you do, that are like more established in what they're making. And if you are on YouTube specifically, YouTube Shorts take less effort and get promoted significantly more right now because there's less of them than actual YouTube videos. So in terms of like growing right now, that's a really good avenue to exploit. And most of it is just a lot of keep doing what you're doing.
I have one tiny thing to add to Andrew's question, since he's still on, about connecting with other filmmakers, especially in Alaska, but probably anywhere. The most fruitful like creative partnerships that I've made outside of work have been with creatives that aren't necessarily filmmakers. Especially in this day and age, so many people like have experience with filmmaking and like lend valuable support, even if they aren't like filmmakers. But also the collaborations that I've made with musicians or other visual artists like feed into my work in a way that makes my filmmaking so much stronger. And I'm like, those relationships have, both from like a networking standpoint, which is a frustrating word, but also just like a learning standpoint, have just been super fruitful. And I know Alex isn't on here anymore, but like I'm a huge fan of Alex's work, and I just like, one thing that is really cool through her work is seeing so many different multidisciplinary artists represented through her filmmaking, and that like collaboration seems to make it really strong. I won't go into like why that is, because that's her own thing, but like it's yeah, it seems related to that. So that was one added thing, advice, other creatives.
Well, we're a small community ultimately, right? And so it's nice to bridge all the way to Flint, Michigan with you, Travis, and be able to have, you know, a variety of conversations, because we are a little isolated up here in Alaska, but certainly there's a lot of capacity for us to continue to build. So thanks again, and I'm really grateful for everyone to be involved, and we'll keep in touch.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.